Have you ever wondered how your sales performance compares against your competitors and peers? The B2B Sales Benchmark Report provides the definitive guide to what success looks like in 2021. See how you compare in terms of win rate, sales cycle, average deal value, relationships, and engagement. You can see the results and get the full report at ebster.com/B2B-sales-benchmarks. This is Sales Ops Demystified, the #1 most downloaded podcast in sales operations. We invite the brightest minds in sales operations onto the show to deconstruct the why, what, and how behind rep productivity, forecasting, metrics, and all things revenue. This podcast is brought to you by Ebster, the leading customer engagement platform for Salesforce. Welcome to another episode of Sales Operations Demystified. Anyone watching live, thank you very much for joining live. If you have any questions, ping them in the chat. Anyone listening, either afterwards or on the podcast, thank you so much for tuning in. Today we're joined by someone who has less experience than other people that we've spoken to, but I think this is super, super interesting to get kind of a different look at the sales operations career. Last week, we had a guy called Jeff from Intercom who'd been in the game for like 20 years, obviously like a massive value there. But I think we're going to get different insights here. Right? We have someone who's super smart, who's been at sales ops for two different startups. That I'm really happy to have on. So Joe, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. As you know, guys, we're going to run through the standard 9 questions, but also if we find stuff that's interesting, we'll jump in and highlight that. So I already kind of know the answer to this, but I'm super excited to find out more. Joe, how did you get into sales ops in the first place?
So it all kind of started when I was working as an SDR at GoCartless. We had a few internal changes within the sales structure, and as such, we saw a drop in commission of about 60%. And as all salespeople, we're very focused on our commission, so I started digging into the numbers.
So you guys were selling stuff, so and then you noticed that you guys were getting paid less.
Correct.
And so you were like, okay, let's try and figure this out.
Yeah.
And what did you find?
So I kind of first started digging into leads, obviously the trends just over year, and then tried to tie in when the drop of leads happened, sales addressable leads, shall I say, in terms of how we could sell to them and any internal changes. As such, we managed to tie this back to an internal change.
Okay. And so would you say that the work that you were doing there was like sales operations work?
Pretty much, it was sales operations work at that point. We didn't have a fully fledged team then. I think we had one member of the sales team.
Sure. Okay. And so what happened after that?
So after that, I kind of raised the issue internally with my boss and ended up being offered a move into sales ops.
Fantastic.
Okay.
And so I assume that when you were doing that kind of investigative stuff into the process, you enjoyed that more than doing the SDR work?
I enjoyed both, but I think I've always had an understanding of or tried to dig into why things happen and what causes it, right? And that's something which allows kind of, I'm very easy and able to do in a sales ops role.
Got it. Nice. Okay, and so then you switched over into sales operations. What happened from there with GoCartless?
So we were managing a sales team of about 40 to 50 people between two of us.
So there's 2 people in the sales ops team, 40 to 50 salespeople.
Sales and customer success, correct.
Cool. Okay, and you're responsible for all of those people?
Exactly. Everything and everything, really. Everything and anything.
Sure.
Yeah.
And did you guys report into like the VP of sales or the sales manager?
Correct. So we reported into the VP of sales and the CRO at that point.
Cool. So the VP of sales reported into. Okay, so the VP of sales was the CRO.
We had a VP of sales and a chief revenue officer.
Cool. Okay, and then in your team, there was yourself and there was another sales operations person.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, cool. And how did you find it?
It was very challenging at first. Didn't really have a very clear scope.
Mm-hmm.
Our kind of general role was to kind of help and enable the sales team, but it wasn't clear on what things we were doing that with. It was up to us to kind of own our own projects, or understand where we want to go, which, sometimes can lead you down the wrong path, or sometimes it can lead you down the right path.
Mm-hmm.
But you do kind of hit those hurdles very quickly.
And because obviously it was quite the person who joined sales operations before you joined, I assume wasn't there for that long.
No, he had started about 3 months prior to me.
Okay, fair enough. So it was quite a new operation. And since then you moved on to a different company in sales operations again.
Correct.
And is that department in the new company as mature or slightly been there for a while? Or?
It's smaller. It's just me.
Oh, really? Nice.
So I'm now leading out the function and just trying to make sure that we get it in kind of along the right tracks at least.
And how many salespeople are you currently working with? We
currently have 19 and scaling very quickly. So when I started in January, we had 11. Really high.
Fantastic. That's cool. Okay, so I'm getting carried away here. I'm going to segue back into the main questions. And you might have touched on this already, but what do you think makes an awesome sales operations person?
As I said, it's just this ability to dig into the why. Like, what is happening? Why does it happen? What are the impacts of this? And I think from that side, having worked in sales, had a very good experience, kind of understand what changes and how that would impact the sales team. Responsible to help the sales team to do the job. So having done that, I had great experience in going, okay, this will influence them in this way, or this will hinder them. How can I get buy-in from the reps, which is ultimately one of the hardest things. How can you get buy-in from the team to agree to the changes that you're trying to make in order to make their lives better? How can you do it in a visible and clear way?
Got it. And so I can really see it, because you really like this, like digging in and finding out why thing. As an SDR, someone's like, here's a process, you go and implement the process, and then you might see something wrong with the process, but then that's not your job, right? Your job is to book more meetings. And so that really makes sense to me. And you also touched on another important point here is, you can dig into why, you can make changes to the process, but there's completely no point if you can't influence the people who are actually running the process.
Exactly.
And so that's like, you need these analytical skills to understand and assess and tweak processes, but then you need, this is what I actually find fascinating about the role, is that you need those more like hard traditional skills, but then you also need these softer influencing skills. So could you share, like, I don't want to put you on the spot here, Joe, but a time where you've used your like softer skills to influence a rep or an SDR to adopt a new change that you're making?
I'm in the process, obviously starting the sales operations function here. We're in the process of making a lot of changes, some which the reps will obviously agree with and some which they won't. I think one of the big ones for me is we're moving or migrating CRM at the moment. This is obviously a huge challenge to get the reps over. You're going to have a completely new function, how it works, etc. And for them, it's about selling, or not selling, it's about influencing what are the benefits of it as opposed to the disadvantages, right? Yes, you are going to have to work to understand the new tool, but it's going to make your life easier in terms of automation. And I think this is a rule you have to stick by. Automate where you can, and then just go manual where you can.
So you're painting the vision of how great Salesforce is going to be.
Exactly. Whichever CRM you migrate to.
Exactly, yeah. So out of interest, if you can share, which CRM are you moving to and from?
We are moving from Close.io over to Salesforce.
Cool. Yeah, nice. Well, maybe we'll talk more about that later. Do you think that your time as a BDR has made you more successful in sales operations?
I definitely think it's impacted the way that I work in the role in a good way. I have a great understanding of, if I make a change, how will that affect the reps, and kind of what will their objections be to that? Like, how do we help the team get around these changes? How do we help them in their daily job? And ultimately, as sales operations, you're there to kind of be the backbone for the function, for the team.
So would you say that you think that experience is necessary to be effective at sales operations?
I wouldn't say necessary, but even coming to Spendesk, I did a little bit of selling here just in the first few weeks, just to understand what the reps are doing and go through the process. It's cool to have, but it's not necessary. It's a very nice to have.
Yeah. So actually, even if you don't have like past experience in sales ops, why can you not just jump into a salesperson's shoes for like 2 weeks to a month to like? Did you get like big respect from like your reps as you're doing that? Like, did you think that helped you with the?
Yeah, it definitely helps when you're like giving them advice or helping with changes. Like, I know the process. I've gone through the process with you. When you do it, and therefore you like. There's more of an element of trust between the two parties now.
Nice. Okay. Quick question. James is a loyal supporter of the podcast / webinar. I would love to know more about how you / Spendesk forecast. Is there any gems you can share?
Okay. I guess the way that we do it is we take a very more so complicated model. We use the close date and use the percentage likelihood to close. And this is probably one of the easiest ways of doing it. Then you can use those multipliers to say, okay, it's going to close in this date at this percentage. Therefore, we know that we're going to hit X amount as our expected rate.
And I was actually speaking super interesting conversation with some sales guys last week about how they take that data, but then they also have to tweak it or modify it based on how optimistic or pessimistic their rep is.
Correct.
So it feels like for every rep, you actually have this optimism / pessimism factor. And so do you have those like formally, or do you just do that?
No, so we equally have a confidence level, same thing. So we apply the percentage likelihood to close depending on the stage it's in, which is we kind of decide, okay, so it's in the fifth stage of the funnel, it's about 50% to close. And then we have the rep confidence or the confidence to close. That's them saying, okay, it's 60% or it's 100%, and then we just multiply the 2%.
But then you also have to apply this factor to that confidence vote because that's from the rep, right?
Exactly. It gives it something. It just gives it a little more human touch as opposed to this is what I think it should be, which is not always right.
Nice. Okay, moving on. The current ops tech stack. So we have Salesforce as a CRO moving from close. Do we have any other tools?
One of the biggest ones for me is hull.io. This
nice.
is one of our data kind of sources. So
I use hold as in HOLD.
HULL.
HU, cool. And this is a data source.
It's kind of a data warehouse. It's like a Zapier on steroids, I guess, is what they market themselves as.
Oh, really?
So it allows me to store all the data and push it to whichever tools I need them to push to, regardless of if there are integrations or not.
That's pretty sweet. We haven't heard this one before. Anything else?
I use SalesLoft as kind of a part and parcel of sales engagement in terms of a dialer, email.
Yeah.
That's obviously very good for the tracking. And that's kind of what our reps seem to use. And then as we go down the funnel, obviously you've got your video conferencing with Zoom. And then you kind of move over to our kind of contract and quote system, which is HelloSign at the moment, but we are looking to move to Doc.
Nice. Solid. Okay, cool. And out of those, or do you have a favorite tech tool that you're kind of using? Is that hold.io?
In terms of the power it brings, yes. In terms of the power it brings and being able to just easily clean data, move it around between the tools, and it kind of just gives me a lot more control over data hygiene.
I'm going to take a quick look at this now because it sounds super interesting.
Really?
So if anybody is listening or watching, Hol.io is James's favorite tech tool, the only real-time B2B customer data platform. A single source of truth to unify your MarTech stack and orchestrate your entire customer journey. It's good copywriting. Okay, awesome. And probably related to Hull, how are you currently dealing with data quality in close, and then how do you think you'll deal with it moving forward to Salesforce?
Yeah, so again, Hull and merging that with Salesforce will become the source of truth, and I think it's important to have this source of truth. So as I said earlier, you need to automate where possible to kind of release the burden from your reps. So we can take data from LinkedIn and pass this over to Hull, which then is passed to Salesforce automatically, saving them just have to fill in a few fields, but it saves the reps a lot of time going down the funnel. And then obviously when you're manual, I think the best way to do this is, again, get the reps buy-in. You can explain, yes, this is manual, but every time you do it, I'm able to give you something back. If you feel that this has got a bounced email, then I can go and find you the correct email, or I can pass it back to wherever it needs to go. And that's crucial.
So selling them the vision.
Exactly. Always sell the vision.
So what I'm hearing is when things are automated, so you can use Salesloft to take information from LinkedIn into Salesforce. Hull, sorry.
Yeah.
Really? I can take information from LinkedIn straight into Salesforce.
If you can code in JavaScript over the top of it, yes.
Can you?
I can't, but we have an engineer who can.
Cool. Okay, so that's okay. And all that information is going into Salesforce, which is going to be the one source of truth. But then when you have manual processes, you sell the vision, explain to them how much more commission ultimately they're going to get if they do this thing.
Correct.
Cool. However, we've had other people come on that have challenges where they have their one source of truth, like Salesforce or CRM, but then they get all these duplicates, they get all this other stuff in there, and they're like, do you have any processes that you use to clean or?
Yeah. So in terms of Salesforce duplicates, even at Go Cardless, there were always going to be duplicates. It's very hard to completely avoid it. Again, this is where Hull comes in as such a good tool. It allows you to clearly and visibly see accounts and it merges them automatically based on either a script you build or based on whatever kind of keys that you're using, identification tools, if you use website domain or whatever you're looking to use. This is such the power of Hull.
God, these guys, they should be paying you, shouldn't they?
They should.
Okay, awesome. What would you say is the biggest challenge you currently have in your role and how you have overcome this?
Has to be at the moment a balancing act in terms of time and stakeholders. Migrating CRM is not easy as one person in a team, and let alone doing the 6 or 7 other projects that I'm working on trying to set up a sales operations function. It can be very tricky to be balancing, teams such as marketing, sales, operations, data, as well as migrating a CRM. It's a lot of time. As I said, it's that balancing act. And it's a fine line to make sure you're hitting those deadlines properly.
So all of these different people are coming to you and they're being like, Joe, when are we migrating? Joe, when's the new SDR process being published? And you have to be like, sorry guys, and you have to prioritize your time to who you think is most important.
Yeah, prioritizing, but it's also going the other way. I think sales operations, it does have that beauty of interacting with pretty much every team in the company. Operations, as you would have it in general, like speaking to product, getting the feedback from why you've lost deal and passing it over to product. There's always triggers within each team. It's important to kind of have that balancing act between them all.
We haven't heard that before. I like that. The beauty, one of the beauties of sales operations is the ability to, or the exposure you get to every part of the business. Because I guess you're going over to the tech team and being like, can you write some JavaScript code for my application?
Exactly.
Okay, cool. And do you have like a single metric that you judge your sales team by?
A single metric?
Or what's the most important?
I guess the most important for us and what we're looking at, like any company, is always the MRR. But we tend to take a delayed look on that. So we tend to wait just to ensure the MRR is okay.
Interesting. So you would judge a salesperson based on how much they've added to the MRR in a time period. But
yeah, we like to follow the growth. So from month 1 to month 2 to month 3, just to see that kind of trend of growth. That's kind of one of the important things for us.
But then you are waiting until month 3 in order to really count that, because the salesperson could have sold like the absolute dream. They get passed on to customer success, and then they realize that they've oversold, and then they might churn early on.
It wasn't true. Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
But you know that if they paid you 3 months in a row, they're probably solid. So you're just focused on like the top line revenue these salespeople are bringing you.
Correct.
Awesome. And is there anyone that in your sales operations career that you've worked under or has advised you that you have thought like that's really kind of sent you on your way or educated you?
Not so much in sales operations. I've only had a very short span, and in terms of I've had 2 very small teams.
Yeah.
Myself and one other. I actually think my manager when I was a SDR was super influential for me.
Oh, really?
In terms of digging into why and understanding more from a customer's side of view. And then obviously when you look at it in sales operations, the salespeople are your customers from that side. So always making sure that you're putting them first or understanding their pains and working towards them. I think that was what my SDR manager was telling me always.
Was that person also the person who like helped you move over to sales operations at Go Cardless?
He definitely influenced me to kind of keep digging. And he wasn't the one who offered me the job, but he definitely kind of motivated me to keep going.
What's that person's name?
Joseph Robbins.
Joseph Robbins.
Works for Go Cardless in Australia at the moment.
Oh, cool. Awesome. Joe, fantastic. Now, that was a brief one, but let me highlight the things I really liked. We've heard it a couple of times before, but when you're the way you influence the people in your sales team is to explain to them how much their life is going to be better in the future. You're telling them the vision. I really like that. I also really like the part of the beauty of you being able to interact with every team. And then finally, a little gem there at the end is putting, we've asked people before, who is the customer of sales operations? Some people say it's the CRO, some people say it's sales team, but here you're saying putting the salespeople first, they're the customer. And you learned that from Joseph Robbins.
Exactly.
Awesome. Joe, do we have any more questions? Let me just quickly check. We answered the forecasting one for James. I have Jack here. How do you map accounts to someone who has just joined your sales team midway? Good question, Jack.
So fortunately, this is something we do a lot as we're scaling very quickly. We have a very short inbound function in terms of after a few weeks of training, we'll start giving them inbound leads. And also, we're able to take old leads which haven't been contacted in the last 3 weeks, as we have a very kind of robust outbound function. So we're able to pass them over old leads which haven't been contacted in the last 3 months, for example, and that becomes the kind of core of who they'll be contacting in the first few months.
Okay.
We then refresh our lists every quarter, so that then gives them something more.
Okay, cool. So if I join now, I wouldn't be given an account that is already in the sales process with someone else.
No.
Because I assume I actually don't know, but your sales cycle, I assume, is not like 6 to 12 months, right? It's not like...
No, our average sales cycle is about 31 days.
Cool. Nice. Great. That's really great. You knew that off by heart straight away. You can tell a true sales ops ninja by if they can... Okay, cool. So you're basically saying that the sales cycle is relatively short. So if a new sales rep joins, you can just chuck them either some inbound after a couple of weeks of training, or you refresh lists every quarter, so they're going to get assigned loads of stuff.
Exactly.
Makes sense. Awesome. Joe, thank you so much for joining. You have any other gems you'd like to share with the audience before we go?
Any other gems? One cliche I always use is that sales ops is the metronome of the revenue function.
Oh, that's good. Can you explain that, because I don't really understand?
It's basically like saying you're the kind of ticking beat for revenue function. I say revenue because I always like to kind of merge marketing and sales together. We always have this misalignment between the two functions commonly, and why we think of them as two functions, I think, is something we should change.
Yeah,
they should stick together. Like they're just an earlier part of the sales cycle, so we have to. So in terms of that, you're just making sure that everything ticks over smoothly.
Yeah, like a metronome.
Exactly.
So you're actually saying there that sales and marketing should be one team, and you could just call that team revenue, the revenue team.
Yeah, you can include success in that as well.
Yeah, that's this is a big trend we're seeing as well. Maybe so. Like, have you pitched that to your like COO or to anyone in the business?
Pretty much, yeah. We tend to stay relatively aligned. Like at first when we came in, it was even in the CRM, the values for our source was marketing or sales, and it's not competition. Right? So I very quickly like just a subtle changes, inbound and outbound. Very quick change, but it's like the two functions work together.
Yeah.
Because if you have an outbound lead which you can't get interested, you can pass that back to marketing to do some inbound work.
Exactly.
There's a link between the two.
And then what's the source then, right? If it was outbound, then if inbound, then it was outbound again. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah. So it's the source for us is the source where it comes into the rep when they would create the opportunity.
Cool.
So if it didn't work outbound, then it would change to an inbound source.
Nice. Awesome. Joe, thanks so much for your time.
You're welcome.
and we'll speak to you later.
Have a nice day.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Sales Ops Demystified podcast. If you are listening on a podcast listening application, then please subscribe, rate, and review. And if you have any questions about the show, if you know a guest, or if you have any questions about sales operations, just hit me up at tomhunt@ebster.com. That's tomhunt@ebster.com.